Hi there, Chris Courtney here from New Pragmatic. Thank you so much for taking a moment out of your day to join me for this short video on setting your machine up to do front-end work. As designers, one of the biggest leaps forward that we can make is diving into doing front-end development work. When you're just starting out, one of the worst habits that appears to be universal to all new front-end designers is file management. Now, while I'll digress from diving in too far here, there is one fundamental thing that I want to address, and that is where you store your work. A lot of people tend to save it right here on the desktop, and that is really a bad idea, mainly because you could accidentally move that folder or delete it, and then that's just a terrible situation to have overall. The next worst place to put your project folder would be in the documents folder. I say that because literally everything else on your machine, every other file that you have, tends to live in that space, making it really hard to get to the work that you have. So what I tend to do, and what I would suggest that you do, is create a projects folder that lives at the same level as your documents folder and your desktop. This creates a dedicated space for you to store your work in a place that's easy to find. To do that, it's just mkdir and then really whatever your project name is. So for I would call it projects, you could call it work, or any number of things. And now, as you can see, I have this work folder right there at the top level of this directory. The second step in this process is installing a good text editor. Now, if you discuss this topic online, it's a good way to get a nice war of words going with other designers and developers. When I started my journey into coding, Coda was the text editor of choice. And then it migrated. Sublime Text, Brackets, Atom have all come and gone, and as the text editor of choice at the moment, VS Code is by far the hottest tool at the moment. Now, in the future, that will change. Personally, I like VS Code, but I'm not going to judge you if you choose to go a different direction. That said, let me walk you through the process of installing VS Code and show you some of the reasons why it's the hottest text editor at the moment. To install VS Code, you'll need to go to code.visualstudio.com. There are a number of different options available for you, so you can get this for Windows and Linux as well as Mac OS. Once you download that, the installer will run on its own, and you'll end up with something like this. There's two things that are really important for you to have right out of the gate. The first is installing the shell command. What that'll do is it'll allow you to open any file on your computer into VS Code by simply typing in code and dot. So I'm going to go ahead and install that, and as you can see down here, shell command code successfully installed in path. What that means is if I go over here and type in ls, I'll come over into my projects folder and I will cd into kvh, and then I will type in code dot, and that will fire immediately anything that's in that folder to open in VS Code. It allows you to keep from having to manually find the files and then drag them to VS Code. The other thing that I think is really important with VS Code is the ability to actually have terminal in VS Code. And this allows you to, instead of going back and forth with terminal, firing up servers and reading error messages in terminal, you can have that operating in the same space. And as you can see, if I click on index.html, this is an old file, but I have my index.html here. This is for an old client site. And then just down below, I actually have my terminal available if I wanted to spin up a server or something. This is an extremely valuable thing to have. It's something that is pretty unique to VS Code, and it's one of the primary reasons I tend to lean toward VS Code versus other code editors that I've used in the past. The next thing I want to do is help you level up this command line prompt. Right now, it's missing a key component. I don't know whether version control is being applied to this or not. So with that in mind, we're going to create a bash profile. Then we're going to add a bit of code that's going to elevate the version control status for that project. To get started, I'm going to cd out of this and I'm going to type in ls-a. In this location, you are looking for a file called bash profile. I deleted mine so that we would be at the same place in this particular instance. To get started, let's create a bash profile. With that created, I'll hit ls-a and you can see bash profile now exists. A quick query online will surface a number of different sites that have the code necessary to surface the version control status for a particular project to the command line prompt. To do this, I'm going to type in code dot to give myself access to all the files that were in that folder. Now I'll open up bash profile, and as you can see, it's completely empty. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to this post from CoderWall. It actually does a pretty good job of breaking down all the information that's involved in changing the data that's showing up on the screen and the color that is being used. And you'll see what I mean in just a moment. But the big piece of this is this function called parse get branch. And this is actually going into the project and sussing out what branch that particular project is on, if in fact it is being monitored by Git. I'm going to grab literally all of this information and we're going to paste it into the bash profile. You can in fact edit everything in this export line, line 4. All of this is editable. I tend to lose everything that's over here because I don't want unnecessary information showing up, like my username. I know who I am. I don't need that showing up on my computer. And I tend to go with the working directory, and then I want obviously the branch name to show up. The numbers that are here inside of the brackets, those impact the color of the information that's going to show up. Everything up here, parse get branch, that's stock. That basically is going to suss out of Git the branch that you're working on. So nothing about that is editable, but everything down here is. Let's go ahead and save that. And now what I want to do is I want to come back over to terminal, and we're going to say source /dot bash profile. And now what you should see is things have changed here quite a bit. We now have my username in front of the computer name, the location, and then the $sign. The prompt is still there. Now, that appears to have just switched things around. What I want to do to show you how this really works is I want to cd into my projects folder and go back to that KVH project. Now, we have quite a bit of different information available to us. One, the C2, that's me, at Mr. Green, that's my computer name. This is the pathway to the directory that I'm in, and then this is the magic part that tells me what branch of Git that I am actually active on at this particular point in time. I haven't touched this KVH project in like 2 years, and yet Git has been monitoring it the entire time, and last time I used it, I must have been on the GH pages branch. This is really helpful to know, because if I wanted to say git status on this project, everything's up to date, but if I said git checkout master, you can see it switched to master. But if I didn't remember that I switched to master like 2 years ago and began editing on this, I could run into problems. Or if I had changes that were hanging out and then I began switching branches, it would create problems. What you basically want here is the branch that you're on always to show up in the command line prompt. And that little bit of code allows you to do that. The big piece here that probably got glossed over though is you have to remember to source that file. And in the sourcing of the file, this is simply saying the directory that I'm aiming at, which was the tilde, which is the home directory, / I need to go into this hidden file. So with that, I'm Chris Courtney for New Pragmatic. If you like these videos, please subscribe. We'll talk soon.